We're working on a movie called Black Film now, where we're exploring the current state of African American film. So, from your perspective, how would you define black film?
Well, I would say, a film that's imagined and executed into the motion picture medium by an African descendant or African American.
Okay, so films about black folks that are directed by black folks don't count? Like Color Purple, not a black film to you?
Well, I mean, I would, for me, the director, that's in the end, where it's translated into. In fact, that film is lost in the director's lack of knowledge of the subject matter. So I would say it lost. I mean, it's a very strong African American literature, but its translation into cinema is completely compromised by the fact that the filmmaker did not know the landscape that he was operating from. So I would say, to me, a black film is like a Japanese film. A Japanese film is imagined, executed, and also intellectually owned by Japanese people. So to me, I think that's why there's a lot of disputed territory that Africans continued, in America anywhere, continued to fight about these films that are catering the idea of white supremacy in not only in inception, but it's also in the kind of subserviency it will in the end do for white supremacy. Because when you imagine a story that is not driven by black characters, from a source of black imaginative origin, the war is lost, and that's why there's a great deal of debate and discussion, and continued for the past, from the time black people have made movies, especially by movies that were done by mainstream cinema, have been challenged by the black community as a legitimate cinema. And I understand it perfectly.
Now, you come out of sort of the LA film rebellion, but it's also sort of around the same time was the black arts movement. Can you speak to how the black arts movement helped influence some of your work?
Well, the black arts movement itself is a repercussion of the, I would say, the war of independence by African people everywhere. So there was no black arts without the war of independence. The very fact that, from the American black political movement, from Du Bois, Garvey, you have to place it in that, and the African independence led by people like Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, etc. And so it's an ideological culture that came about as a result of black people defining or struggling to define their own identity by overthrowing the domination of white supremacy on the cultural sphere. And so the black arts movement, without the early black jazz, without the early, even prison movement, liberation movement, all these things culminated into that period. Now, for me, if you talk about the black arts movement and you are bringing about, Hakim Adaburi, Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, Tony Kate Bambara, then they are part and parcel of that period that anyone who wanted to imagine an alternative planet, and especially through the expressive mediums, was operating from this movement of national black identity struggle.
Well, that's interesting to me. I mean, and from that came the black aesthetic?
Of course, it's always like that. Even the white aesthetic comes from the French Revolution, the American Revolution. So the revolutionary period, the upheaval of black, demand to, for autonomous, for autonomy, for wanting to be in charge of their destiny, brings the cultural component with it, because politics is not in the vacuum. Even armed struggle in Africa that was waged is not in the vacuum. And so even if you take Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, what do they unleashed the cultural literature of Frederick Douglass and etc. So it's inseparable relationship between politics and the ideology of art.
So take for example one of your early works, Bush Mama. How does that speak to the time and the desire to make something uniquely black?
It's a synthesis of in my study of Frantz Fanon and George Jackson. Here again, it's the War of Independence coming into my literature, because Frantz Fanon, you have to see him in the Algerian Liberation Front. Cabral comes in, George Jackson comes in the African American liberation struggle. And so this literature has a lot to do with my interest in doing Bush Mama. And so I think the politics is, without the cultural component, is completely different kind of politics. The politics of, like, for example, the politics and the art of deception is one part of it. But when you talk about the kind of liberation struggle that is waged against white supremacy or the domination of white supremacist cultural dictatorship, when you declare war against that, whether it's in Latin America, Africa, Asia, in African Americans in America, you unleash all kinds of art. Of course, the artist in American context is encouraged not to see herself or himself in the context of the struggle. But when you look at the struggle of society taking black artists into task, and debate and discussions, and even guilt of artists for not living up to the expectation of their society, shows you this reciprocal relationship of politics and culture.
So, I mean, in the whole history of film, are there works? I know in poetry there was black art, or there's a black aesthetic expressed. In theater there was. Do you think we've reached that ever in film? Or is it compromised by the nature of
the business part of it? Yeah, because poetry, the medium of motion picture itself is business oriented, finances in the picture, more so now than ever before. If you look at white films of the early 1930, 20, 40, 50, 60, there were battles of ideas. The different directors, different political orientation, they were navigating with capitalism. In fact, some of the most profound films to come out of America were very socialist influenced. It correlates to the political movement in America. And so even Charlie Chaplin is considered by many as a left-wing or socialist filmmaker, because he amplified the ordinary people, the tramp, etc. So, but now more and more cinema it's very difficult to bring about the kind of story that is that matters to social change, profit or money and box office, etc. But again, it depends on the generation. The generation now is a very confused generation as far as like independence and autonomy. To have, I mean, there's no space now, even however racist it was, there's no space for black artists in any field to bring about what jazz musicians achieved, from King Oliver to Duke or whatever you want to take it for, you know. And so it's very difficult in motion picture to transaction the cultural psyche and identity of black people into motion picture, because the ever ending, even silently, power of capitalism and profit continue to compromise in the field of imaginations. In other words, young people are raped by capitalism to imagine. So like they're like surrogate people who are impregnated by capitalism than, let's say, the right of their own imagination. That has now even shifted in terms of like not many people really are fighting to defend their identity, the source of their imagination, wherever that imaginative art comes. They try to respond to society's idea of culture, art, from the time they found it, meaning like at the time of the worst political climate in America, for example, versus, let's say, 1930, 1940, 50, the labor movement, etc. It's a different kind of the race issue, etc. Race versus class struggle. Even when we came in, the class struggle was real when we came in. Now, young people are born into the mutated power of capitalism as if it is something normal. And so for them, it has been more difficult than us even to negotiate the right of imagination, to be pregnated by the very community they come from. So you can go anywhere and be impregnated by surrogate ideas of irrelevant subject matters because you are a filmmaker. So filmmaking becomes itself an ego. In times like this, it's very difficult for young people to access their identity in motion picture.
Well, you've been teaching young people for 30 years, right?
That's where I got this point. I'm telling you,
Okay.
That's where I learned.
So one thing that I've noticed is that, we're sort of in a, quote unquote post-racial America where, before blackness was defined by oppression. The black people were the people that weren't able to do certain things, and out of that came a certain level of creativity. Now we have the freedom to do whatever we want, and people don't want to be told that they're limited, that there's oppression, that there's racism, and I think that's causing sort of a schism.
Well, then there's no innovation involved, because when you find, in fact, that's why black people are making ordinary black people are making their own movie with their cell phone. They don't even care to look for filmmakers anymore. So that's what, if you look at film and extend it to the way the black community, however imperfect, confronts police brutality with their cell phone, shows you the absence of the cadres of filmmakers who could have articulated it better by having the skill and craft and imagination. So the community is saying, you ain't my filmmaker. I'm making my own film, because immediately now, housing, police brutality is an immediate situation. And so in many ways, the filmmakers are in New York and in LA, knocking at doors by the very prescriptions they think have to go through to make movies. But history is passing them too. So it's and again, I'm not judging this generation. I'm glad I'm not part of this generation, because it's very difficult. The oppressive, the capitalist system has created a very, I would say, subliminal relationship with those who operate with imagination, to a point that it automatically, its capacity is so superpower in the speed of light. It can sing your song, the minute you declare the black power anything, it joins you to black power it and diffuse it, you know. So black people, every time anything from rap to anything they come up with, it's already taken by Nike and Sony, and you know, it's become like commodified. And so, you know, Occupy movement, the system itself cross-dresses and joins you and marches with you. And so in a time like this, it's very difficult for young people to really create a very solid and somehow targeted struggle to transform the conditions of black people, because the conditions of black people here in Africa, Brazil, has not changed.
So what's the importance of us being able to tell our own stories?
It's psychological. Fundamentally, it's like, for example, it's like a form of exorcism, because when human beings went into the cave, began to tell their story, they were asserting their identity, who they are, putting themselves in a time capsule of continuity, and therapeutically passing prayers, songs, healing psychological therapies. And so when you look at, you know, tribal communal societies in Africa, whether it's adorning the body, the clothes, or the yard, or the mask, or anything Africans have always done, even including the music, has a lot to do with the transformation of the community, psychologically, spiritually. And so, yes, when you don't tell your story, you'll be a confused human being forever. And that is what we are testifying now. We testify in Brazil, in you know, Jamaica, in Ethiopia, Ghana. We testify as displaced people because we've lost the grip of our own story. And all human beings make stories to have a sense of continuity as human beings. The white power structure sustains its continuity. It's very greedy. It names the streets you walk on. It tells you who invented the street lights. It tells you who went to space and called it name with all Greek names of all the galaxies. Why? It has a mileage for white people. White power is a very undeclared, silent, confident domination of the world in globalization terms. So they don't have to assert continually, because we live in their dictionary. We live in their vocabulary of white supremacy. Our desire is contaminated and held hostage by white supremacy. And so in a time like this, fighting to declare your own identity, your own story, therapeutizes you, gives you a sense of continuity, a human, where you've come from. Otherwise, you are a non-entity. And so stories are a battle sounds, a battle cries. When you say, I want to tell my story, you're saying, I'm discontented. I am left out. I'm marginalized.
Right. So we've seen waves of black filmmaking happen before, in the 30s, in the 70s, in the 80s, and now there seems to be a renaissance of black filmmaking, black storytelling. You know, what do you think defines this wave that's a little different from previous ones, or is it all part of the same continuum in your mind?
It's a continuum of forward and backward. You know, it's like on some aspect, black people are going forward. On another aspect, they're going backward. And so in film, it becomes really insignificantly not that important. But in literature, for example, black people in music and literature have established. But the problem here now is now we're learning who owns the intellectual property of black imagination. Now is going to be a 21st century issue. Jazz is great, but who owns it? Blues is great, but who owns it? And then if this is not capital, no wonder I can't make my own movies. Who owns the capital? If black people, if black people have produced so much cultural wealth leave sport out, just in jazz, in blues, in gospel, in American music that goes all over the world, how come they don't have a cent of that capital in order to extend and transform and transaction the future and the present imaginative process? How come they can't finance their own movie? Why are they still poor? To me, if I even only owned Billie Holiday's music, I would make 20,000 movies. I'm sorry. So who owns the intellectual product of black people? Intellectual literature, even now, black publishers, for example, you talk about black arts, etc. The independent one published, financially they went out of business. There's only like 3 or 4 black publishers in literature. You know, Third World Press, Red Sea Press, Black Classics.
Right.
Yeah. Who owns the writing and who reissues it? Why are most of the black intellectual products and books out of print?
So what should be the goal? Ownership, being independent, telling our stories, or infiltrating the system so that we can have more influence over the way we're perceived by the world?
Well, I can't speak about infiltrating the system because I never met those who came back out of that dragon's mouth. So I would leave it to infiltrators. From slavery to now, we have known, including the African colonial history, infiltrators have gone, but they never came back. If they did, we would have some tangible and formidable position. To me,
but in terms of black popular culture, you do see people like Kevin Hart, Will Packer. They've had a lot of success. Tyler Perry has had a lot of success. You know, Ava DuVernay, they were talking about her directing the next Marvel film. You know, these are great strides. You know, being able to make $100 million at the box office with black actors.
And who owns it? You see, black people have always, especially, you see, what you have to be very careful is, it's a new plantation you're telling me. Black people have always produced the largest sugar in the planet. Black people have produced the largest cotton, if you include Africa and Brazil. Black people have produced, but did they own it? So I think, be careful now. There is a new plantation that has mutated to make us be confused. And I would not say, you know, people should not, you know, work wherever they work, etc. I always ask, then what? After you do this movie, where do you go and who can you determine your next movie? Otherwise, I just don't think there was economically formidable fallout from Sidney Poitier's infiltration. And line them up from then on all the way to now, Denzel Washington. Infiltration is equal to what? See, black people are good in emotional claiming of everything, including that, you know, Jesus was, you know, black. Well, let's quantify these claims. As far as I'm concerned, I will shut up if you show me a quantification. And I would work for a black capitalist to make my next movie. I want a black capitalist who is not going to railroad me to the plantation system. And so that's, I think. The other thing is, you know, you were mentioning young people. I think they have to do, I'm just saying I could be proven wrong. And the young people have to prove me wrong if they could do that. But I would say it's very important for them to know, we've heard from Sydney and before Sydney, black folks who advanced their individual vertical mobility in the industry and still came out of it poorer, like, you know, Jackie Wilson in music. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, that, like, no one could sing like this brother ever. He was one and the only one. But who owns his voice? See, this is, to me, critical. I have intellectual properties, and I'm telling you, as I get older, I'm talking about who owns it. Am I going to give it up now after I suffered this many years to produce them? Am I going to give it to white plantation owners who do not have any accountability to my history, to my story? This is the issue, and so for me, I would leave it. I think Eva, since you brought her name, I think she's an amazing strategist. I'm studying her moves to see. She's cooking unlike many people I know. I mean, I don't know Tyler Perry. I don't know none of everybody, most of the people you mentioned. But with her, I'm waiting to see her this skillful strategy, and it's, survivalist mechanism, in or out. And I'm not sure she's too smart. I think she knows, from what I'm gathering a little bit of by her. I don't know her very well, but I think she's smart. I don't think she would put all her eggs in Hollywood like many black people who did and became now completely humiliatingly beggars. And that's a lesson for her and all the other young people. And so for me, it's not a big deal. We've known rich black people. In Chicago, there was in fact, I always wanted to make a film on this man who was one of the biggest, richest black men on earth. And when Depression hit, he was the first to go to jail and ended up as a doorman to all the people he exploited in slum dwelling relationship. And so we've known Rivers, we've known Claims.
So no one gets out alive. No one. If you're black, it's hard to leave here.
Let me tell you, my brother. Where is the black bank that we knew existed at a certain time? Where is the black capital?
So is that the biggest issue? Is it financing the films, or is it getting audiences to go support films?
Well, to me, I think audiences is not. To me, black people, if you make a credible, honest effort in responding your true feeling, however imperfect that is, black people will embrace you. We proved it with Sankofa. Black people will embrace you. Without big publicity, without anything, they will embrace you. The problem here is, I don't think they have delegated us to compromise them in boardrooms and change their stories by creating all this things that white filmmakers or white artists do not have. White artists don't have the pressure of living up to saying, oh, we have to have 10 black people in the story. There should be, we're shooting in DC, it can't be all white. They just make movies. I think black people, always go in a room and are told it has to be streamlined. Even you take Selma. I mean, if I did Selma, the LBJ will not be in the story. And they were and she was good enough to let them have LBJ in the film. She inherited the script, it came with it. But I'll tell you, they should be grateful he is in the story, because he does not deserve to be in the story. Okay? So they don't get, they don't get satisfied. They get greedy and gave the sister hell. Okay? They should be happy and grateful for letting LBJ be part. No, there were more other stories that could be told instead of the time he occupied in the screen time.
Yeah, well, that was a big controversy, and some people feel like it cost them some nominations. The fact that there was some backlash that LBJ was represented, sort of, they felt unfairly in the film.
Well, I don't think. I think, to me, as far as I'm concerned, the project was snatched from white power structure, and it cannot be forgiven. It's a film that has moments that are unforgettable on especially Martin Luther King's as a human being. It's a film I appreciated because it made Martin Luther King a human being instead of a myth. I'm very grateful for her for doing that film. But at the same time, LBJ should not have been in the film.
Well, let's talk about your film.
Which one?
The one you're about to do.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
You ready to go out? You're going to go out. You said you did the scouting and stuff already, right?
I did, but then it got interrupted. The script had been written last September. I should have shot. Now it should have been finished, edited.
And what was the hold up?
Well, there's folks who gave decent money. The European Union took back their money, and my co-producer was ill, and they took the money back, saying, we don't trust the African filmmakers will manage. Although the money, by all proclamation, was given to the film. But that's neither there nor here.
So we're here. We're using technology to help get the word out, to help raise money, and allow you to independently make the film that you want without compromise.
Well, when I'm begging, I'm compromising, my brother. So the whole thing is, it shows. I started my life with, crowd fundraising. I'm still crowd fundraising. I'm not proud of that. I should have. I think that for the kind of exhibition and distribution my films have, the kind of prize they got, I should have had some decent, not big money, decent finance to just do films instead of, again, taking another year to find money.
Well, I'm just curious, what do you think happened? Was the world not ready for it, or what were the factors that kept, like Sankofa was a huge success. Why weren't there more opportunities immediately following to make films?
It was a huge success by black population. Black people put Sankofa on the map of the world, but they don't own no banks. You have to know that. To me, black people can embrace a movie, and they did amazing work for us. The Sankofa family across the United States helped us distribute the film. And so, for me, black people, they could love you like hell. They hugged me like hell, millions of them. But it doesn't translate to black capital or black financing infrastructure. Because regardless of the success of Sankofa, we still are a community that economically is not empowered. Okay? So, yes, black people could, could vote for you, but they're not decisive economically. Because no independent black banking system or any economic infrastructure to finance uncompromisingly all intellectual expressions of black people. What a freedom to have. For the first time, we need a planet to say, sister, just give birth of a story you want to tell. Brother, just give birth of a story you want to tell. That is a white luxury, not a black luxury.
Right. So,
and sorry to depress you, but to me, until you create the economic infrastructure that is also interested in multiplying and transforming, the cultural expressions of black people, it remains mortgaged. And when your imagination is mortgaged, the story of a people is compromised. Because you have to know the artist doesn't want to compromise to the very community. But it's not even the issue. The artist is expected to compromise to white demands, to transplant white characters that never were. For my mother to exist, she has to drive Miss Daisy. That is a complete racist arrangement, but we allow it to this day. Everywhere I go, there's a Driving Miss Daisy play going on, if not a movie. And most servant movies are made to drive Miss Daisy one way or another. Why is that? It's because of the white power over black subject matter.
Well, I think Melvin Van Peebles, he once told me, Hollywood lives by the golden rule. He who makes the gold rules. So if they're paying for it, they want to see themselves reflected in the movie. But I don't know if you've seen these recent films like 42 and The Butler and The Help. You know, they were all made over $100 million. And they all sort of had a perspective that racism is something that America tackled in the 60s.
Fine. It's not my problem. I don't see these movies. One, they don't bother me. I create a space, as you see here. This is my place. This is my liberated territory. Thanks to those who went to Sankofa to see. They gave me an editing space. I'm grateful. So it's not my problem. See, it's very bad to compare, you know, because it's like saying to a slave that wants to, an enslaved African to run away, planning to run away, telling him about the black folks in the big house have infiltrated a good life, so why escape? It don't make no sense. So for me, they're not my modality. In fact, I would say I have white filmmakers I respect more than just a black filmmaker. I'm not a nationalist blind. Mm-hmm. In fact, I believe in this, you know, class stratification. The only contemporary movie I've seen is Selma. Mm. Outside that, I do not care. I'm not compelled to get in my car and go see a movie. I've seen some in a jury, international jury, and they don't grab me. Because I can tell from the writing, from the way it's concocted, the hands of the white power structure, white supremacy, or the culpritness of the black filmmaker in bringing about white power in his or her imagination. They don't mean nothing to me. And nor would I see them as adversary or fight. I rarely talk, I mean, I don't even think about them because the preoccupation itself would have to be from a problem. I don't have no problem. I don't have a problem with a very contented black person in this planet. I'm discontented. Mm-hmm. Irresistibly discontented black people are attractive to me.
Okay. So, you what is it catharsis through your art?
No.
Like, or no. you observe at your stage you can observe this, know what's going on, and still find other things.
I focus because I think those black folks who should be busy about inventing with whatever humble resource they have should concentrate on that and not be diverted, because one of the techniques of white supremacy is always trickling cadres of their own ideological soldiers impersonating your interest. To be diverted is equally a problem for me. I don't care for those black people who are preoccupied to argue every time Hollywood makes a black film. I don't go for that. I think that energy should be spent productively. Even if only you paint one frame of your grandmother, that's more power than debating for hours on Precious or something. To me, it's irrelevant. I don't join it. It's not my type or my way of, that is diversionary. Mm-hmm. And the system feeds that and lives off of that.
So what's the goal? What's your mission statement?
To make my movie, to make my story. Tell my story without thinking all this diversionary things that hijack your power or right of imagination. Defending my imagination is key for me, is important from day one. Once I moved into motion picture, I said, from here on, I defend my ideas. I defend my stories. I'm as greedy about my story as white people are, period. And that's normal. And most white people say, yeah, that's correct.
So let's circle back. That's a good note to carry on about this new film.
Yeah, Tutuliji, is a film, it's about a domestic servant the principal character and a love affair with an ordinary character. And what interests me about is how her life is locally dominated and globally dominated in the American empire. So I'm fascinated by her story, because her want to love is not affordable locally by the local power structure. So if you then, even if she escapes the local power structure over her, she enters the global power of the American empire that began in the Second World War. So I want to make a film about, even love is headquartered by this empire and arrangement locally and globally.
And what,
simple.
What led you to go to Indiegogo as a platform?
Young people like this woman here, they're always saying, you're missing out, brother, you got to get in here. I'm really a railroaded traveler, and I'm studying it. In fact, I'll tell you this, I don't do outside interviews and things. I don't do nothing. I don't even lift a finger. All I'm doing is editing a documentary film downstairs, and they're enslaving. A lot of people who want to help me are enslaving day and night. I'm not lifting a finger, because for me, doing this film, finishing a film before class starts, is my preoccupation. That's real, tangible. I grabbed the film. It's about the Ethiopian Italian War. My ancestors, my father fought the Italians. I want black people to see how black people don't apologize when they go to war with white people. And so I want to make that movie. It's tangible. This one, if it happens, is going to empower me. I'll be very grateful to all these people who would help me. But until it materializes, you don't live on that. You live in concrete things. Even if you only do a humble, small film, do that.
Mm-hmm. So, but Julie Dashie did a Kickstarter. Spike Lee did the Kickstarter. There seems to be a trend in terms of this.
Well, they didn't influence me, because I'll tell you, I didn't even know the mechanics of it until a few weeks ago. Some young people just said, wake up, get into this thing, let's help you. So I don't know. If they went, they didn't send me no blueprint or experiential anything, as far as I'm concerned. So I am in it now, and I'll tell my other friends, if it succeeds, I want to pull Charles Burnett, Larry Clark, Ben Caldwell, and then say to them, hey, folks, Billy, this thing works. And I will be a good, what you would call I will be the missionary for the cause of crowd fundraising. And it's real. I think it's powerful. I think the idea is powerful. I just don't know what kind of network and power we have to really make it also our own. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not clear. I'm always suspicious. I'm a man who was born in the middle of wars where my body and story is underneath. I had to find it in the rubbles of white power structure, white supremacy. So for me, 24 hours war is being suspicious of everything, including the technology. Every camera, I don't just embrace. I was telling Brad the other day, a lot of people misunderstand. I don't love film. I hate film, because it was used against me. It was used against my psyche. It was used against my people. So I'm not like this blind, film, I'll kill to do film. No, I'm suspicious of cinema. It has destroyed Native Americans, so many Latin Americans, their history destroyed by this 100 years history of this weapon. In fact, Latin Americans call it the new hydrogen bomb. So why would I love cinema? I never. From day one, I was not. I look like I love film when I talk shots and film grammar and my students to make them work hard. I sound like I love film, but it's a misinformation I'm giving out.
Was there a film that you saw in your developing years that made you say, aha, I have to make film?
Yeah. The Power of Cinema, Usman Semben, his film Black Girl, Boram Sarat opened my eyes. Latin American films, The Hour of the Furnace by Solanas, The Blood of the Condor by Sanjinas from Bolivia, Miguel Litin, The Jackal. My brother, Latin America, even American filmmakers that are going around not paying tribute were influenced by Cuban films like Memories of Underdevelopment. So when I was at UCLA, these are the movies that I was attracted to when I saw the power of the cinema.
And let's touch on that and maybe two more points and then we'll be done. So that era, it's known as the LA Rebellion. When I've had a chance, the relics of that were recently toured around the country, and I got a chance to see in one, big month at International House all of this amazing work that seemed to be about Black people, but done completely outside of any kind of system or studio system. From your perspective, what was that time period? What was that movement about?
No, the part I was in was actually not a single Black nationalist movement. It was a group of Black and non-Black people who went to school at UCLA, who were intellectuals in the environment in that area, who were debating class versus race. So I'm not part of that. This LA Rebellion is not a Black thing. It is a multicultural, especially Chicanos, Asian students whose fathers were doing gardening to those Hollywood people, Native Americans, okay, and I dare to say some white folks, and we were studying, that's Richard Wright, George Jackson, again, Richard Wright, The American Hunger. He split with the Communist Party, was very important for us. Langston Hughes, Good Morning Revolution is what we read in poetry. So, there is a Black ideology because Black people, especially Fanon, Aimé Césaire, and Nkrumah, etc., the Pan-African movement was very left-wing to begin with. So it's not just, I'm not a soldier of the Black bourgeoisie. I will never be a soldier of the Black bourgeoisie because it's a paper tiger, it's irrelevant, it doesn't have coherent cultural program. Black people with money, I say, well, after you die, your kids go to war in court systems, etc. But what use is it? What pyramid did you build with it? So modern Black capitalists mean nothing to me. They don't leave no pyramid, no monuments, no movies that should have been produced by them. I would have been the first slave to enter a Black bourgeoisie owned a Black film industry. I would work for him or her. So for me, this waving to me all these rich Black people means nothing because they never leave. When they die, they never leave one small pyramid. We only know they were the first Black rich people. So what? Big deal, I would say. Mm-hmm. You accumulated money, but what pyramid did you build? This is where white capitalism, comes to profile its power. Because the white capitalist knows culturally he or she has to become immortal. Mm-hmm. Not by the money, by the culture he or she subsidized. Mm-hmm. Rockefeller is not by the money, it's what the monuments they build to keep their names going. And so for me, I'm not like that. So the LA Rebellion thing is a very contested issue. It is ideological. It is not every Black nationalist who is a member of the LA Rebellion. Or else, if there was a rebellion, it is a multicultural. I don't want to betray Native Americans who were there. And in their silence gaze at this racist cinema industry, I learned a lot. When they want to dare make a film, I learned a lot. I felt a member of that community because I too craved for my story.
Well, how could that how does it happen at UCLA and not USC or any other school?
Well, there was a brother, Alicio Taylor, I think, who is forgotten, who started to bring these films I'm telling you. He was a teacher there. He was undermined, fired even. But when briefly he was there, he brought black students, Chicanos there. Alicio Taylor created bringing African filmmakers like Usman Samben to UCLA, Latin American filmmakers to UCLA. So politically, you know, Angela Davis was around, so George Jackson is around. All these are environmental things declaring against capitalism, because capitalism shortchanged us, compromised us, only exploited our history. And so we had that phobia already. But for me, LA Rebellion is ideological and multicultural and multiracial.
So in terms of the pyramids that you're leaving behind, how do you see your legacy thus far?
Imperfect. I did my best. I'm proud of all the films I've made, because never did I make any one of my films having a silent power in my head telling me what film, what story to tell. Every story I did, I'm driven by it. I'm driven by it from internal. They existed, they became, in spite of the cliche discussion. For example, when I did Sankofa, hey, doing slavery movie, that's the end of you. Slavery is that's the last thing to touch. No, it comes, I pick, and then it became a vocabulary. Sankofa is now part of the words of things. I'm proud of that. My film is imperfect, but the movement is powerful. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So Bush Mama, I made that film. I imagined it. I gave birth of it, and thanks to the camera people, the actresses that gave me free labor, and collaborated in shaping it to be a filmmaker of intensity. But it's an imperfect film. Ashes and Embers, the same way. Mm-hmm. All my films are imperfect, but they have one driver, obsessed, unrelentingly uncompromising, and that's Haile. I don't compromise. Are my films the greatest? No. If black people embrace them, it's because they didn't compromise them. Because black people know when a movie opens, they know it's against them. They are being compromised. Well, in the opening credit, they'll tell you, even when we came to the theater, like in Baltimore, when black folks heard we produced it, they could not believe it. And they would go applauding and putting money and leaving money to us, because they do not want to be silently mortgaged by nice do-gooder white people who would make film for them now and then. And then black people are asked to be grateful. By the white woman who did Imitation of Life, who wrote Imitation of Life, she called Sterling Brown when he criticized the film, and she said, "You people are ungrateful. I give you a chance to be in a movie." That's how they think down there.
Well, that was an exciting time. Ushered in by She's Gotta Have It, and you had Sidewalk Stories and Sankofa and Daughters of the Dust, Hollywood Shuffle. There were a lot of independent films being made at that time, by black people, directed by black people. That it was just an exciting time.
I don't think it was an exciting time.
No?
For you it is, looking at it now. It's a hard labor time. It's a very, very difficult time. The films, don't be deceived by their look and their claim. Even what I'm saying now was very difficult to finish. How long it took Charlie to finish To Sleep with Anger. The difficult, I'm sure, I know very little. Daughters of the Dust, very difficult. But the Spike thing is another planet, meaning they come after this movement has established itself in New York, LA, wherever they were being made. Spike is buttressed by these things that happened as he was coming in. Ernie Dickerson, who shot for him, I used to show him these LA films here as a student at Howard. I even feel Mo Better Blues is indebted to Larry Clark's film Passing Through, because Passing Through was the first film that put the idea of jazz in colorful African American cinematic accent for the first time. I'm not saying that film established an amazing, and I knew and I showed Ernie that film a lot, and I'm sure Spike Lee had seen them. I saw him when he was a student at Clark, where I showed Child of Resistance. We had brief encounter. I remember him very well because he's a very insistent person. He used to come to Howard also. So they have to know this had impacted on them. But not only this, Sembel Usman has played a major role in influencing African American cinema. Because here's an African man in Africa making his own movie in his own language. That is now, there, when I first saw his film, the fact Africans spoke their own language, not English, not French, that was like a heart attack case for me. I was grateful. And I said, damn, does it mean my characters can speak their own language? And that's how Harvest was made.
So last thing. For people watching who are inspired after hearing you speak and want to make films that challenge the cultural norms, what words of advice, what can you say to them?
First I have to charge them. They have to go to the Indiegogo for your tutelage, okay, child of, pay, and then I will advise after that. And my advice after you go to Indiegogo, she's gonna kill me if I don't do child of. You see her laptop? So if you don't do that, she's gonna kill me. And so I would say, first understand clearly the historical circumstances of the time and place you live. Don't think yourself egotistically as God. When you think of yourself God, you compromise your principles because there is no such a thing. For me, look at the time and place you live. Stories are critical and important and therapeutic, but prepare yourself. Storytellers cannot outlandishly, flippantly make a story of a people and make sense. Respect your people, respect yourself, respect where you come from, respect the past, whatever people attempted to do without you judging it in your own time and capsule. And then study a great deal. Not only your own cultural outputs of African descendants from here, Africa, Brazil, but also the world. Read Russian literature. Go into some Chinese novels, translated of course, if you don't speak Chinese. Go to writers in Europe, Latin America. Read Open Veins to Latin America. Galliano is one of the most powerful writers. Read George Jackson. Don't underestimate just because a black man or a woman is in prison. Read Angela Davis. All the time study. And don't say, until I study, I'll not make a movie. I'm not saying that. Study concurrently as you tell your story. Grow. Be willing to grow. And then the final thing is, respect people who walk in to see your film. Respect each one and every one of them. If they walked left, they could go to a bar, they could go to a date, they could go many places. They came to a room to see your film, whether 5, 10, 100. Respect them first. Don't be arrogant filmmaker, because filmmaking is a fascist preoccupation. You walk all over people. You exploit women, you screw everybody, because the movie is your right of being fascist. Don't be part of that. Fight the decadent culture of filmmaking as it comes down to us from Hollywood, spearheaded by Hollywood. It's not a big deal to be a filmmaker. You cannot be forgiven just because you're a filmmaker to walk all over people. And that to me is how you prepare. And this is nothing. I mean, I'm not saying nothing new, but this is saying respect yourself, respect the people who come to see. Be grateful they came to see your film. And hear them out, because your next film is going to grow and be better from listening to them.
Okay, thanks. I had asked Bradford, do you think real, true black cinema can exist within the Hollywood system?
No. There's no truly, really, truly white cinema now anymore. In the way we know white cinema, like Citizen Kane, or even John Ford, however racist he was. Even white film has become a clone. It has become plastic. It's become the human part of white story. Even the literature like Faulkner and all those guys, the American Grapes of Wrath cannot be made now. Taking its time, for Henry Fonda to just do his monologue. Now he has to sell his chest, if not a Coke, if not a jacket, if not a fashion. So even white films are in trouble. Forget black people, Native Americans, etc. White films are in trouble. White cinema is in its decadent era. It's it's mutated to be stupid. Some of the best white filmmakers don't even make movies anymore. They make wine or make spaghetti. They stop because they say, I can't be silly and stupid. And most of them will tell you the films they made in the 1960s, 70s, 80s cannot be made now because this doggy industry has become a garbage disposal. So what you see is white garbage decorated by black garbage. Okay, now Hispanic and Asian garbage, mix all that. It's supposed to be multicultural gratification. No, it's capitalism concocting its own gumbo to still live more years exploiting people.
That's crazy. All right. Thanks.